This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
With that, we will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, June 6th, 2023. All of us are in person, but we are recording. First item on the agenda is public speak. Is there anyone here to speak to something that is not on the agenda tonight? Yeah. Anyone online? Eli? Don't see anything. All right. Next up, we have planning board minutes from May 2nd.
No changes. I motion to approve the planning board minutes for May 2nd.
All right. Voting to approve the May 2nd minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? All right. Next up, public hearings. First item on our agenda is the continued public hearing for Tasty Top Development LLC. So, couple updates. One, since we last spoke, our traffic peer review and the applicants' traffic experts have been meeting, I believe, working together on something, but they needed more time to report back. So we are still waiting on traffic, but it sounds like that may be more of a cooperative traffic answer. So that seems promising. So as we did last week, it doesn't mean you can't ask questions or raise things about traffic, but we're sort of in the dark on traffic for now. So it might be better to focus on other stuff. And we do have some new information from the applicant. We're going to go through. The only other thing I wanted to note on the agenda is we do have an agreement with the applicant to extend the deadline for approval. So we should be set on that until November 9th at the latest. So that is on the record. And Jeff, any other updates or things that have happened in the interim that we need to know for the record?
No, just new information coming from the applicant. There was a letter that came in this afternoon, and I think they're prepared to speak to that.
Okay. So maybe we can start with that, with the applicant going through some of the new materials they've submitted and what's been going on since we were last all here.
Good evening. Luke Scholter, state engineer. Everybody see this?
We can.
The whole board. Sorry, we meant to have it on the screen, but I wasn't able to get it to work.
Oh, we can't get the multimedia work. Oh.
What about sharing the screen?
Oh.
It just doesn't the color segment, but we can go.
Yeah, that seems to work. All right.
You're not actually sharing your screen now. You gotta, so go back to Google Meet and then hit present. It's that middle one.
Screen.
Yep. Put the photo in the middle. Not that chair.
Yeah, no minutes after that.
Yep, if you, yeah, that little hourglass thing.
All right.
Well, good evening, everyone. So since our last meeting, we've been working on some significant plan revisions in response to concerns that have been raised, as well as some feedback we've heard from the community. Last week, we submitted a revised plan to the board, which incorporated all these proposed changes. So right now, I'll just go through and give an overview of all these changes and their impact to the project. First off, we removed about 14,000 square feet of retail space from this building right here. This eliminated the need for the truck loading and unloading area behind the building. So that space was converted from paved area to green space. One of the more significant changes is we removed one of the residential buildings entirely. All associated paved areas were removed, including the driveway, parking, and walkways. It also eliminated the need for water basins in that area. Since this is one of the areas that needed to be cleared for the development. Eliminating this building contributed to the reduction in the tree clearing by 1.3 acres. Although we removed a residential building, the number of proposed residential units for the entire project was unchanged. Half of the units that were in this residential building were moved into the retail space that was taken away. The other half would be added to the proposed residential building 1, which increased in footprint to accommodate the additional units. The 3 residential buildings furthest east, they were all moved 10 feet to the west. They were kind of squished in as much as we could, while maintaining all of the requirements. This allowed for a little more area not to be cleared of vegetation and trees. Initially, 2 restaurant pad sites were proposed along the frontage of Northampton Street, 1 and 2. One of the 5,500 square foot pad site buildings to a 3,200 square foot bank use. So there was a significant reduction in retail space there, as well as a significant reduction in traffic volume. So between the removal of the retail space, as well as the changing of one of the restaurants to a bank use, the traffic was reduced by about 1,400 daily trips, which comes out to a 24% reduction in traffic to the site over what was previously proposed. So just to recap the impacts that the proposed changes will have to the project, tree clearing will be reduced by 1.3 acres, which is approximately 23% less tree clearing than what was initially proposed. On top of this, nearly 200 trees are proposed to be planted throughout the site as part of the development. Impervious area on site was reduced for half an acre, about 25,000 square feet. And the anticipated daily traffic to the site was reduced by 24%. So that's an overview of all the major changes that we made on plans. We're hopeful that it addressed a lot of the concerns. And right now I'll pass it off to Peter Graham to speak more about the affordable housing aspect of the project.
Are you going to be presenting something or just?
I do have a slide and it's in here. I'm just gonna scroll over to the email here. Okay. Let's see. That's perfectly fine for our purposes. So yeah, I had spoke to the affordable side of this in December. I'm a local housing consultant focusing on affordable housing development and was hired by Sage and the team to help shepherd this through the state process. One of the things I want to set this up at the onset is affordability as required in zoning is 80% of AMI, which there's a lot of people in this room, myself included, who don't see that as very affordable. 80% AMI is still a pretty, is actually more, the rents are for 80% AMI are higher than market rents in Western Mass broadly, okay? In the eastern part of the state or in high, in Cambridge or Somerville, 80% is going to be a discount on market, but not out here. Okay, so that's one thing. So when we first proposed, the rule is certain percentage at 80%. Even in the original proposal, we plan to have far more than that as affordable and deeper levels of affordability. But I suggested to Frank, don't commit yourself to more than what zoning requires. That's just a standard business practice. knowing that we were, in order to make this work, far more of these units are going to be affordable. So here's the affordability picture. And I know it's small, but I'll read it out. So 202 units total over the course of 7+ years to kind of develop this out. What I have here, this is kind of not in stone. This is basically how the process works when you try to get affordable housing from the state dollars and get it built. About 54 units per round. That means about 3.7 or 3+ rounds of applications to the state of Massachusetts to win the awards to get the housing built, to pay for the affordable housing. In the first round, assuming we could get permitted this fall, round applications in January, awarded in the first try, which isn't always the case, and built in 12 months, we'd have occupancy in January of 2026. The state funds per unit proposed are about $100,000 a unit. Private funds per unit, $280,000. That includes the low-income housing tax credit, which is a public-private partnership, which includes a lot of compliance dollars, or a lot of compliance eyeballs on everything from design to occupancy to management to upkeep and maintenance and all of that. Local dollars, maybe about $50,000. That includes grant or local money from the town. That's kind of the variable. So you have about $430,000 per unit to build, which is not the most expensive building you can do. Right now, affordable housing development in Western Mass can go over $500,000 a unit. But this is, some of this price is given the nature of Frank, the team at Sage and Burrow doing design build and having an ability to keep it economic. So the cost of phase one, $23 million and change, okay? And then I basically have the second round occupancy maybe January of 2027. If again, everything happened as smooth as butter could happen, which is not the way it happens in the state. Again, every single round of application and funding will have eyes on the prize for design, compliance, management, occupancy, all of that. That's part of what the low-income housing tax credit program has done in this country, is created this public-private partnership so that many eyes are on the affordable housing developments so that they don't look shaggy and everything else, okay? So what I have here at the bottom of the page is, imagine all 202 units are done. That's over $20 million of state funds, 59 million of private funds through the low-income housing tax credit and debt and equity, and 91 million in total housing investment over the course of 7 years. And again, that's 202 units, and then we'll scroll down and I'll do it by the numbers as far as affordability. What we're proposing, and the market does impact our decisions on some of this, as well as the equity investors who help fund to make this happen. We're proposing 10 workforce housing units per phase. And the workforce housing units are for incomes between 80 and 120% of AMI. So they aren't affordable per the city's guidelines. They are subsidized to kind of create that housing unit for somebody who is over income of the low-income housing tax credit program, but still can't afford to pay true market. These, by all accounts, I believe that and the next category down, the 28 low income, that 60% AMI, all of those are really workforce housing. That's what we're talking about, folks. People who work and don't have enough money to raise a family and pay the rent that is out there because we have such a limited housing stock because it's so hard to build houses. That's why we're here. we're planning for housing because the community, amongst many others, have decided housing is critical for our economic growth and well-being. So then the next category down are 16 very low income units. Again, this is the projected 54 unit per funding round layout. 16 very low income, that means it's supported by a subsidy that allows a person to even have no income or very low income, Social Security, disability, veteran disability, whatever it may be, that allows the voucher to pay the rent, which pays the mortgage, which keeps the grass green and the playground in good shape, right? But also allows somebody who is living there who doesn't have means, whether it be through whatever it is. Again, seniors, I know that I bet you everybody in this room knows 3 or 4 people who could probably use help making their rent payment. So that's what that is. So there you have, if you then take that same model and bring it through all phases, you've got 35 workforce units, 109 low income, and 58 very low income. That's by 2029, if we're lucky, right? So I know there's been a lot of conversation over the last 6 months. It's not affordable enough. I've been in this business for 25 years. I've got $79 million worth of state closings happening right now, personally, in Western Mass, all awarded, not closed, all for low-income housing. These things take time, and and what you have is a community that is addressed and seen the need, put it in a housing plan. And when Frank saw the housing plan, saw this land, he literally practically picked it out of the plan to put it in place. Not like a developer, purely coming in to make a boatload of money. It's a combination of things. It's an economic community benefit to have mixed income housing, economic growth. And this is, after all, private property. And this is why we're here at a planning board, to talk about exactly this, planning the future of the community. These other slides, which I will make sure that are submitted and available online, are really just breaking down what low-income housing rents are. So a 1-bedroom is $1,000 and 59, 2 bedrooms, 1,200, 3-bedroom is 14. So that's based on a household of 4 at 60% AMI, making $56,000 a year for that 3-bedroom. 80% rents, which we again are that workforce section. Those are rents at $1,800 for a 3-bedroom, or a family of 4 making $75,000, and a 1-bedroom is at $1,500. And then this next slide is kind of where the savings are when you go to required affordability for the city, 80%, 1-bedroom, $1,500. Reduce that by another $440 to get to the low-income housing tax credit rent of $1,000. In green there, I happen to know there are market rate units, new construction, in the $2,800 for 2-bedroom. The low-income housing tax credit would save you $1,500 on that. So I don't want to hear that this isn't affordable. If we can make this happen, it's affordable. Here. Again, these are kind of the descriptions of what the 30% reach is, what the 60% reach is. These are, again, they'll make sure that the board has them for some of the basic statistics that aren't changing in the positive as far as how unaffordable things are for families. This is just the affordable unit mix based on the 54 unit phased development. I think the other thing I wanted to touch base on, I'm going to actually see if I can't go back to that email. I hope this was in the share mode for folks online.
You were.
Okay. Let's see.
Go to that back arrow on the white arrow.
Thank you.
Top there, right there.
Okay. So here is a community in Easthampton that is not smart growth, right? This is farmland turned into maybe 70 housing units in about the footprint of what Sierra Vista is proposing to have over 7 years, 200 housing units and some commercial activity, right? So again, is it the smartest growth? Maybe not. Maybe we could stuff a 6-story building against the neighborhood right there where the JC Top was and call it a day. But is that what the community wanted? No. Is that what the zoning allowed? No. We basically followed the rules. I mean, basically, we followed the rules. There is an interpretation of the rules. And as people on this board would admit, not everything that they had intended in the rules got written in the rules. You know, we want to have more than 18 units in a building, you have to get a waiver. So you can't just, but yet they determine that it is 18 is the number, right? They want, you want to have more than one building, you have to get the special permit. That's what we're here for. As far as the smart growth district wanting to really juice up how the density can happen, I think there was a woman who made a comment who interpreted the zoning code possibly by the letter of it correctly, where it was, you know, calling for even more density. But it, again, we worked with the town to interpret it and put it together as we believe it was envisioned. The other, I do want to also go back to the plan. I took the liberty of just to kind of, again, in summation, talk about what is different here. These three buildings up here are getting pulled away. This building here goes away altogether. This building down here turns into residential where it was commercial with residential above. And then this building, which is in the smart growth district, is allowed to get larger by 8 units so that we can maintain the number of affordable units and the number of units in general. All of these red hashed areas here look like parking. They aren't. It's green space until if the determination is that they need to be turned into parking. So they may look like it's impervious, but it really isn't. There's this section here, this section here, 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 and over here. And then while this doesn't exactly show it, the size of that building on the plan here did not get reduced on the plan, but it's going to be not quite half the size, but much smaller there. So, yeah, no, we also gave lots of thought in looking at the proposed layouts that the trust had put together. And again, in the grand scheme of things, when you have
You can leave that open and then, yeah, you can stop sharing screen on the middle tab there, where it's going at the top, going back to the meet.
right here, this one.
Up a little higher right there, and then it stop sharing.
Says
Okay.
stop
Stop
Sorry.
presenting.
Well,
Thank you.
right angle on the
I'm a
bottom.
little Google
Oh, there it's in.
there too. Okay. Yeah, no, we looked at things that were proposed, and again, there, you know, there's a lot of great work and a lot great effort done there. When you can maximize smart growth by putting together a multi-story large building, you can get more density. But is that density who's it for the benefit of? I mean, what we're proposing is nice oversized units, 18 in a building, 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, around an open green space with a pool and a community garden and playground. And why can't those 100 families enjoy the wonderful Mahan River and its surroundings? You know, I'm here all day long. So it really is a matter of choices and the community's interest to create affordable housing, which we all know is a need, and to do so tapping millions of dollars of state resources in the process. So, again, we appreciate and we enjoyed working with the community to kind of bring this together, but wanted to make sure that we had a chance to respond to some of those questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't have a presentation for you, but I just want to keep it brief. I wanted to touch on a couple of points. Don Abel, attorney for the developer. I wanted to bring us back to where we were and what we were trying to accomplish here. Looking at some of the comments, it was presented as an invitation for the planning board to do some planning about these projects, and kind of struck me that I've been impressed over the years. I'm a resident of Easthampton, and my office is located here. I think the planning department, planning board, and the city as a whole has done a very nice job of looking to prepare for the future. There's a number of plans out there: master plan, housing production, open space. So I think that there's a job well done there. And I think that as we look at this project, we also want to remember that this project is part of that overall scheme. And what we're looking to accomplish is to achieve some level of balance for the benefit of the community across the entire community. We have a very supportive group that is looking to preserve open space, and that's an admirable quality. I have hiked and climbed all over the Northeast. I appreciate it very much, but there's balancing that has to occur. And we, as a community, have decided that this is the highway business district where we want to develop commercial use. We've also just recently adopted the SGZD, the smart growth zoning, as an overlay district recently for the specific reason of bringing housing and affordable housing to this area. And so we are here, and your decision is to balance all of these various interests. And so there's pressure to look at this project in its microcosm, but we also have to remember what brought us to this level, and where we are in terms of planning for the community for the future. I know there's been some comments about the fact that this project seems to be so very large, and by numbers it is, but I think it goes to that same conversation about planning. There is a current affordable housing need. That housing need isn't going to be addressed immediately. Community is going to need those things. We also have some vital economic proposals here that are going to assist the community. We're bringing in the daycare, we're bringing in the gymnastics, some of these small contractor units, which we found throughout the community have been very beneficial. And I think what happens is that we've got what appears on plan to be a large project, but it's going to be developed in phases, and it's going to be subject to conditions built as we go along. And what we have in front of us is an opportunity. There's no guarantee that happens, but we have a plan put in front of us which is comprehensive and cohesive, and we can make plans as a community with this in mind. And we know we've got this coming up, and it helps us rather than piecemealing this and designing small portions of this because it's more comfortable to sort of comprehend. I think it's beneficial for the community to know this is how we're looking at doing this. We're going to start in phases. There's going to be subject to conditions. And it gives us, it's a good planning exercise. We know how we're going to address these certain needs in an area of the community, identified by the community as a place where we want to have commercial housing with the retail that's associated with the highway business. The other benefit of having this larger development proposed is that the biggies that we've got in front of us or among the biggies are traffic and infrastructure. Those are issues that are confronting this community, irrespective of whether this project goes through. We have a problem. We are not creating it. There are certainly going to be added pressures on it if this project is built, but associated with that is by having an approved project of this size, it encourages Mass DOT. We were on the level, that they weren't even looking at us until we had the unfortunate incident, a year ago. But By having this project here, DOT's now put us on an elevated level, looking at how to solve Route 10. Because whether it's this project, whether it's farther down Route 10, change is coming. I think Mr. Brown put it eloquently. We'd like to preserve in a time capsule the memories of when we had our families, but change is coming, growth is coming, and we need to prepare for it. This project, by having it be approved, brings us to the table. It also does the same thing with Mass Works. There are infrastructure needs which we need to address. The community is responsive and is acting towards it. But by having a development of this size, we get brought to the top so that we have access to Mass Works and grant funding and attention from the state in order to increase that. There's going to be expenses incurred by the developer associated with both of those elements, which are going to be for the benefit of this development, but also for the community as a whole. I guess we're also looking at along those same lines. We haven't done the calculations on a specific value, but there's going to be a significant increase in the tax base in the community, and hopefully done in a way that's compatible with the plans that we've laid out as a community before us. But there's going to be a significant bump, and we all know we need it, and it's going to be in areas where we can hopefully keep Easthampton one of the more affordable tax rates in the area. You need commercial. We need some of these projects in order to accomplish that. So I wanted to point some of those issues out to you as to why it looks so big, but that it's being done in a controlled fashion. Planning board and the city council have made expended the energy for the zoning. We're coming in with a plan which I think addresses and fits that, but to be built in in an orderly fashion and subject to conditions by boards. I also want to note the planning board's charge is to evaluate this project on a number of factors. And again, back to two of the biggies is traffic, and also the very important issue of protecting resources, the natural resources of the community. We are currently, the traffic design, the decision as to impact of traffic is the purview here, but what we've done is we're bringing in the DOT, and the DOT is ultimately whatever size project we're able to accomplish. They're going to come in and regulate that for us. We can't do anything there without, it's DOT's road. And on the other area, with resource protection, it is important. But concurrent to this, we have a notice of intent filed with the Conservation Commission for an application under the Wetlands and Riverfront Protection Act. And they are doing a rigorous job, and vigorous of making sure that we're in compliance. And those guidelines they're strenuous, and will do the job of making sure that from a scientific basis and calculations that whatever we do here is not going to cause harm to that resource area. So comments, concern, it's part of your purview as well. But there are engineers and scientists, and we've just agreed to do we're doing peer review in traffic. So we brought in another consultant to protect the interests of the city. And we've done the same thing on the Conservation Commission side. So we've got peer review there. The state's looking at it, local conservation is looking at this, the state DEP is looking at this, and we have a peer review to assist the city in that respect. So those issues are going to be addressed by qualified engineers with different perspectives, so that at least two of those biggies that can seem a little daunting to us are being addressed by professionals, and hopefully that in accordance with the city's wishes and desires. So just a little perspective on, we have to focus on the drawings, but understanding what we're trying to accomplish here and some of the benefits that the city can take. Thank you.
Don, before you leave, can you just let us know what the status is with Concom? I know there's a peer review being done right now.
Peer review has just been initiated. We are still working on some of our presentation. I would defer to the engineers. They're much brighter than I am. Peer review has just commenced. We haven't received a report back yet. I anticipate that our next meeting, which is in another week, I think, another 2 weeks.
July 10th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So at the request of the peer review, they want to make sure that they've got a comprehensive view. So peer review is just starting. We haven't seen the results yet. We're working on some of the issues that we can still control, and massaging things and revising our plans. But it's going to be a little bit before that the Conservation Commission doesn't want to act without that peer review process, which is completely understandable. There's a lot there, so.
Okay,
Working hard, but as you know, it takes time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Planning board members with any questions at this point?
Is there a discussion about the rotary? I see a rotary in the plan.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, is that something that we're waiting on the traffic
Around about.
experts on? Or is that,
I think that's better served with the consultants working together to give it kind of rather than our perspective. Neither of them are here attending.
So that's
I don't think so.
I think we'll deal with all the traffic when both groups of experts are prepared and ready to talk about it. But yes, that was one new thing. James?
You know, of course, for me, and I think perhaps for the other board members, it's frustrating that we can't really dive into traffic yet. We can't really dive into the CONCOM's decision. I do agree with you that the two biggest issues, at least for me personally, are the two that you addressed as the largest. And normally as a board, we'd be digging in and making progress, but that's kind of halting things. It's causing a stuttering process here. So I just want to express a little frustration at that personally, but I understand, having been here a long time, that that's how this goes. This is a big project and it requires, you know, crossing the T's, dotting the I's. So I'm with you, but I'm hoping that we get to the point soon where we're going to be able to talk about traffic and, you know, obviously the CONCOM site. You mentioned planting 200 new trees. What trees? Where?
The original planting plan, I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, I don't remember the plan number, I believe it's C 3.1 or C 3.0. That should be.
Yeah, please.
I don't think we have the whole set up, but you can pull it out.
To clarify that point, the plantings have been proposed as part of the process, so it's not a new planting added to the plans. It's always been part of the plan sheet. We just wanted to quantify outright how many were being proposed throughout the development.
So maybe some of the original plan set had that in it from way back when.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Everything that's been submitted has always shown trees. We've been developing the species specifics through the conservation process, so they've been evolving, but they're planted throughout the tree belts, the parking islands around the buildings.
Answer the species question.
We can't hear anything that's that far away. We're not able to hear.
Yeah.
So the majority of the trees are streetscapes trees all throughout, scattered throughout the property, as well as buffering, screening trees between the neighbors and the development. They include red maples, thornless honey locusts, Washington hawthorns, sweet gum around the residential buildings.
Okay.
So we're not talking arborvitaes.
There are some arborvitaes, but the majority are streetscapes.
Okay.
I'd just also like to mention one last thing, and I hope I'm not stepping on this toes, but personally, coming back with some of these changes, I find to be a very positive sign. You know, I went out and hiked the trail behind there recently and could see the location. There's like a little, I would call it Knoxville, but there's a bend in the trail in the water. Yeah, sorry, I missed it. And what I saw out there was that there was an area where you might be able to see these buildings from down below looking up on the bank. And I know that a lot of people that walk that trail probably don't want to see that. Now, me personally, I don't think seeing that would have bothered me so much. I do like, you know, I like the wilderness and I like the, for me, it seemed like it was a minimal impact. But your response of moving it, of listening and moving it back 10 feet, including not just the building itself, but not taking down the trees that are there and moving all the water features that go into maintaining it. I consider that being responsive. The ways in which you presented a lessening of the footprint and taking down trees in or what building 8 was, that to me also was listening. And for me, it's critical and it's important. And I think for my fellow board members as well, that we have a dialogue, a process where we are. In fact, I think I like when you said balance. That's our job. We find balance. we try to find the best possible project that works for everyone involved. And that was a step where I felt your team was helping us find balance.
Jeff, yeah.
Just on the timeline and additional steps that were mentioned, I think just for clarity, the understanding that I have with the Conservation Commission is that the initial peer review is expected to come back to the commission on July 10th. And generally speaking, the way it works is they were going to probably come back with some comments and the applicant will hear them on July 10th. And then the Concom has another meeting, I believe, maybe July 24th or something like that, that following weekend. If things are moving, there could be some clarity coming forward. It may not be solved, it may not be all resolved, but by the middle of July, the Concom should have some information coming to them for the peer review. So I'm just looking at the timeline so that, you know, we don't want it to drag on forever. So if the planning board has the public speak time and then talks about some continuations, we talked about maybe some traffic updates at the end of June, and then allowing time for Concom to hear that peer review. And I think that would inform the planning board maybe in late July. And at least that would be a point in time where we might have more information available about whether the environmental concerns are going to be, you know, resolved through the Concom. And then by then we should have some clarity on traffic as two of the major items. So I just wanted to kind of set some perspective here that we'll probably be talking throughout the summer, but hopefully by the end of July or early August, we'll have some of the major pieces of the puzzle available to the board. So just for informational outline.
Chris?
A question, when are we going to get into discussing the facades of these structures and the overall look of the development? Because that to me is important as an architect's history, you know, and an urban planner myself. Is there any, when are we getting into that discussion about how this entire development will look? Okay, so maybe a future meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we've been presenting elevations of the major buildings, which are the residential structures out back.
Mhm.
A lot of the uses out front, the commercial uses are, the exact appearance is going to be kind of dependent on the final tenant of the use. So what we would hopefully envision is some sort of condition that be blessed by the board before it's, you know, built. But to commit to something now would almost 100% require us to come back at a later time anyway, to modify that based on whatever the exact use and intent ends up being. To pick a use and try to throw windows and colors and doors exactly right would be such a long shot.
Yeah, for the restaurant, I get that.
Yeah.
And I've seen a couple of renderings that have been up on a board and previous, but they haven't been presented. So I just don't know where that's at. And so I would like to just have a discussion around that to see kind of what these apartment buildings are going to actually look like. Because when I look at these big footprints here, it looks to me very industrial, and I don't want that. Right, for the city.
Understood.
I love. So I want to make sure that it actually, if people drive in, they can say, wow, this is actually like when you go through the Northampton development where the hospital used to be. It's very dense, but it's beautiful. So I mean, I'd like to see something so you can just show us what this will look like when it's done, completed construction.
Yeah, and we've submitted three renderings as part of some of the application materials, but it may have just got lost in the noise.
Yeah, and it might, I mean, I think early on, we were sort of looking at bigger stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it might be helpful, I think, to at least have a discussion, maybe at our next meeting and talk about that and at least.
Yeah, I mean, we could have it with us on a smaller scale, but
Yeah, no, I don't think we need to do it tonight, but I think Chris is right. We want to make sure as we go forward with all this, that we're not focus on the traffic, figure out a traffic solution, and then we're done, right? There's a lot of other things that we'll be looking at anyways. I want to make sure we consider everything.
So a similar on a similar note, the commercial mixed use building that was converted to the housing for this round of edits. Previously, we had kind of been comfortable with the building heights and their position on site and relative from any viewpoints from the road and the mountains, you know, the beautiful natural landscape being unaffected. And that was confirmed with our site visit too. Now that was a 1-story building. That's now a 3-story building in that new position. Can confirm that that's won't affect what we had originally, and came to somewhat of a conclusion on? Does that affect that viewscape now that we're moving it further west with a 3-story building in place of the 1-story?
Yeah, that mixed use building you're referring to was always a 3-story building.
What was it?
It was two stories of residential, about 1 story of mixed use. So what we did is eliminated that mixed use, converted it to 6 more apartments and got rid of the rest. So the heights are unchanged.
Okay, thanks for confirming.
Gary, got any questions, comments at this point?
I forgot your name. What's your first name?
Luke.
Pete. Pete. You, yeah. You talked about, workforce housing, and you talked about low income housing. The low income housing, what was that, 30% of the AMI or something like that? Right, so.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, generally, any housing that is below 80% of area median income is considered affordable housing. Okay. These are, maybe varies from state to state, but generally speaking, even in the nation, HUD kind of dictates below 80% area median income is considered affordable.
Okay.
The primary source for creating affordable housing throughout the country is called the low income housing tax credit, and it requires 60% area median income. However, every state in the nation gets to have a rule book on how they're going to dole out that money, and most all of them require the developer to commit to a certain percentage at very low income. Okay. So very low income is 50% AMI. Extremely low income is 30% AMI. So there are these tiers within affordable housing, 30, 50, 60, 80. Okay. Right. And then the mass housing created a program called Workforce, which goes up to 120%. And again, it was primarily designed for communities like Cambridge and the Eastern Mass, where the gap from affordable housing to market rate was so big, they were looking to kind of feed the middle. Okay. And they've used it out in Western Mass with good success, but a different kind of set of rules.
The lowest tier,
30%.
30% of the AMI.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, that's what I.
And again, what a developer, anybody developing affordable housing, whether it's Wayfinders, Valley Housing, or nonprofits, for-profits, whoever, when you are meeting that 30% threshold, you're pairing that with a project-based subsidy, which is Section 8 or MRVP, and that subsidy remains with the family as they're in the unit. Even if their income increases, they still kind of pay 30% of their income as their rental payment, and the rest is covered by the subsidy.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, that was helpful. Sure.
And you're gonna submit that stuff right to your
Yes.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you. You good, Harry?
Yeah, looking at this map right here, where's that 1.5 acre of tree you want to cut down on this, looking at this map? Where's that located on the map?
So we've reduced the amount of acres that's going to be cleared by 1.3 acres. And that's in the area of the building that was.
Well, where's the tree you're planning on cutting down? I'm looking at this map on the upper left-hand side, where
Where the 1.3 acres is?
Well, no, I think the area to be cleared is 4.4.
Yeah.
That's how much is coming down.
you want to cut down 4 acres of trees? That's the idea?
So the majority of the acres that's being cut down is in this area.
Those back buildings.
This was going to be cleared for that residential building, and that was removed. And that's where that 1.3 acres came from, this not being cleared anymore.
So this is got nothing to do with the ones on the back left-hand side?
Well, those, I think by moving them forward 10 feet will reduce presumably 10 feet.
Why couldn't it take these buildings and put them in line with the ones that cross from each other? You could probably bring them right down. You wouldn't have to cut any trees down.
We had a restriction here because there's a wetland
Okay.
area
Never
here.
mind.
Otherwise, that would be a possibility.
If you were to dig a hole, okay, may sound funny to you, but if you were to dig a hole right, you would have put no, how low do you have to go before you hit water? You got wetlands that are right there. And if you were to dig a hole right and stay in the middle of that field, how low would you go before you hit water?
So what's the water table?
Yeah, there were test pits that were done, all throughout the site.
So would this pass the
Also,
perk test?
Excuse me?
Would it pass the perk test?
Perk test.
There was no perk test completed because it's city sewer, it's not required. But, there are test pit logs, that say where the high groundwater is. I can get that information for you and let you
Well, I
know.
was curious. You got wetlands that are right next to this thing. I mean, how are you gonna build a 3-story building right next to a wetland without hitting water?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of this area in particular is, you know,
I'm
20,
concerned about the
30
house on the
20, 30
left-hand
feet
side,
above
not the
level.
right-hand side, not down here. I'm talking about the upper left-hand side, right next to the wetland. Yeah, right in there.
Right here.
Right on the other, yeah, on the left-hand side, the left side. Yeah, there.
Yeah, so this, I mean, it goes down 6 feet, but this area is actually filled in at the moment. That's the farm activity filled it in. So in going through the conservation, permitting, we're actually going to be required to restore those wetlands, even though it wasn't us that built it, it was farmers. But the way the regulation works is the responsibility is on the developer to restore those. So that's actually just field right now, but it's also regulated.
Just a related thing, I mean, I know we're now moving these 10 feet forward in the plan or 10 feet away from that slope. I assume people have sort of done some sort of analysis of that to make sure that that will support those structures. I mean, we've had some projects in the past where it gets a little bit close, and I think part of it is obviously safety and not wanting a building to fall down. Part of it also is that if it does, it goes into a sort of environmentally sensitive area that we especially don't want a building to fall down in. I know you guys don't want a building to fall down either, but
Yeah.
I assume there's been sort of an analysis of that slope and the structure that it can support.
Absolutely. And, you know, right now, the closest structures are, 20 feet from the slope. And then also we've done, analysis of the basins as well. And we have gone through a lot of that through the conservation. They've had some.
I know they're looking at that too.
Yeah.
And that gives me some comfort, but it's good to be careful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have to say that, again, when you think about the amount of money that is, have to go into building these units, it's kind of wonderful, yet makes me pull my hair out, the amount of eyes that are on these developments, both from the state and the compliance, the design review. The state has architects who have to review the design, and it gets hashed out. I mean, not to say that they're more important than you folks, but it is a lot of eyes on it. The geotech reports are going to be needed every time a building is put in, and there are ways to mitigate whenever you're building, but nobody wants to build on, it's not like we're looking to put, I mean, they build on the coast, right? Sure. It's expensive construction, but yeah, there's geotech maps. There's a variety of things to ensure safety of a building. And also we're working with Conservation Commission to make sure that, these areas are protected as needed. So.
Yeah, and I do appreciate, especially in the fields with experts, that we have other people looking at it, but we also know that we're one of the other people that you guys can go tell them the local planning board has already signed off on it too, right? So we got to make sure that everybody's doing their due diligence, but I appreciate that.
I don't quite recall if we've addressed it. But it said something about a sewer connection that was on private property that didn't have permission to get access. Do you recall? Do you recall? Yes. There was
They can't hear you.
Yeah, there was an email. I'm asking Jesse.
Oh,
do you have it up there? Yeah. And I wanted to make sure we addressed that if we haven't already. I don't recall. The email essentially said something along the lines of there's I think sewer access to private property, and you don't have permission. And then, I mean, the person with the email was making statements about how the plan should be stopped for that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'd like to hear you address. Is there any truth to that email? I'm assuming you got the email as well.
Yeah, the owner is in talks with the the butter about connection to the sewer line to their property. So it's in the works, but there's other options of connecting to the sewer line. That isn't the only option. That's the preferred option.
Well, what are your alternate options?
Pumping it to the Northampton Street.
There is another piece of correspondence that might claim that you're going for LEED certification. Is that true or no for this development?
Now, well, I can speak to the fact that in the affordable housing competition to get the funding, Enterprise Green is kind of the level that the state looks to see people get to. LEED, as great as it has been in moving the entire industry along, the stretch code now is largely in the energy code in Massachusetts, largely makes LEED not completely obsolete, but largely. Yep. And so you end up paying a lot of money in certifications and sourcing documentation, but it doesn't change how green and efficient these will be.
Right.
Okay. Could you repeat the name of the certification?
Well, Enterprise Green, and it's an Enterprise Foundation, and they're a national nonprofit that does support, development, and they have a whole green manual as to what part of it is. All I have to say, everything is complicated, but even Energy Star, Energy Codes, LEED, Green Enterprise, not everybody plays nice in the sandbox. So sometimes your intention is to do the best you can do, but also pragmatically make affordable, environmentally sustainable housing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I do want to open this up. I just want, before we do that, a couple things. We do have 2 more items on our agenda, so we can't go super late tonight. And second of all, I do want to just encourage people to not be repetitive, either things that have already been said or things that get said tonight. Try to keep it to new material. And again, if people do want to raise issues with traffic, obviously you can, but I think we're sort of in the dark on that until we have our next meeting. So I would encourage people to try to focus on other aspects. But with that, I do see somebody online. If there's people in the room that want to speak, they can maybe make their way over and make a line. But
We'll go online first.
Yeah.
All right, Martha, you're up. Martha, looks like you're talking, but we can't hear you. Okay, can you unmute yourself?
There we go.
All right. Thank you kindly. My name is Martha Cherry. I live on Park Street. Without reference to traffic, I understood the gentleman who was an attorney for the developer to state that our taxes would be going up as a result of this project. Could I please have some elaboration on that?
I don't think it was that the taxes would go up. I think it's the tax revenue would go up. We've got land there that is either minimally or not taxed, but then it would be when there are occupants there.
No, sir, I'm very clear. He stated that our taxes would be going up. We could look at the record.
He can come up and clarify, but I think he was referencing, Don, do you want to clarify, it was the tax revenue or?
The tax base.
Tax base.
Yeah, there's no envisioned increase in taxes. This is going to provide an increase in the tax base and an additional tax revenue to the community. I'm assuming some relatively significant dollars based on what's there. We haven't done any calculations, but taxes aren't going to increase because of this. In fact, it'll be an increase in the city's tax base. So it'll be of a benefit to the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that? How about the kids that are going to school? You're building 8 apartments, 3 stories, all these apartments. That's not going to affect the school?
That's what taxes are for.
Well,
So where's that going to come from?
I'm not certain whether, and you can let me know. I don't know that impact directly to the schools is one of the criteria we're looking at. I think it's kind of, but if you will, I would encourage you to look at the school committee just received a report. It was presented to the school committee on May 23rd. There is a hearing on record. I think it was a consultant, NESDEC, and I may be wrong. was presented to the school, and the superintendent's conclusions at hearing that thought that it was not going to be it was not going to be a negative impact to the schools. In fact, it may help to stabilize the school population because of decreasing enrollments that are projected. But I would refer you to that report. That's not something that I have. That was presented to the school committee.
It's available on YouTube.
Thank you. Sorry. All right, next.
Hi again. Rick Cernak from 100 Northampton Street and Mountain View Street. First of all, I wanted to thank Mr. Graham for finally giving some information as to the cost of this this large project. The only thing I had seen in the paperwork, the narratives to date, was a fair market value somewhere around $23 to $30 million. And you seem to make it pretty clear today there's going to be much more than that, like 10 times more than that, which is what I expected to see, or more. And that's just for the housing portion. That leads me to something that has been brought up here with the board a little bit before. And there's a need, as a neighbor, there's a need here for some bonding. I haven't seen anything or anything in print yet under the smart growth zoning district ordinances that requires bonding, but I think that bonding is appropriate in this case. I don't want to see a project get started and then stop because of economic conditions or any other conditions. I live on a gravel driveway that's a quarter of a mile long. It can get dusty. Across the street, and in our neighborhood in Northampton Street, there's a lot of clay. And if the topsoil gets stripped and the next step is to start building and they stop all of a sudden, fine particles of clay in the air are deadly. They're really awful. And they can make an awful mess. So I just want to address that. I also wanted to, again, thank you. I'll pass the favor forward and just that when you're talking about the river that runs, Easthampton's a fine small city, but the river runs through it, and you said the Mahan River or something to that, but it's called Manhan. Manhan. So,
not like Worcester.
Not like Worcester, no, or Amherst. So, yeah. So that it's something that is dear to us, of course. The Manhan River is. I know we're not going to talk about traffic tonight. We're not prepared to do that. At least the board isn't, and so on and so forth. The peer reviewers aren't here, but I do have somebody here who spoke last time, and engineering. He's a traffic engineer, and I'd like to ask him to come up and just speak a little bit about the latest plan that shows the rotary. I'm still very disappointed that the applicant has not shown an alignment with Mountain View Street. I am hoping we'll see it soon. There was a specific request at the last meeting, which was I think 5 weeks ago, by the board to see an alignment with Mountain View Street. And this latest design where we see a roundabout doesn't show it aligned with Mountain View Street. I'm going to turn this over to the traffic consultant, David. Lauren?
I think just because I don't think we really have enough for your traffic consultant to help us with this, because I think that this is all up in the air being discussed between the peer reviewer and the applicant. I think
He's been hired to come in, and it's going to be very brief, but there are problems with Rotary, or the roundabout that we'd like to just mention.
I'm happy to hear that, but at this point, we don't even really have a rotary before us, right? We have this on the plan, and the applicant even said that they're not prepared to talk about the rotary. I just think it's going to be, we have a limited window here for public comment. Okay. I don't think it's going to be relevant tonight. I would love to hear from him at the next meeting.
There is something that is relevant, and I wanted to bring it up on something that was brought up tonight that doesn't have to do with traffic. And that is, there was mention, I believe, of an alternative to the sewer line. The sewer line is projected or planned here to go through somebody's private property, to go to the Manhan intersector. The alternatives I'm not clear on. You had mentioned that you could go out to Northampton Street. The Northampton Street line is very small and very old. And I would imagine if you were to go with that route, Northampton Street would have to be torn up all the way down to the Manhattan River interceptor. Is that really the only other viable option, is to go through Northampton Street? Because that becomes a big problem for us across the street. That's it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Mountain View Street is not shown in the most recent plan, and we'd like to see that shown. That's, I think, a requirement of the submittals. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Matowski. I live at 18 Mineral Street in Easthampton. And I was listening to what these guys are proposing about the trees, and they're gonna plant 200 trees on the site, but they're gonna take away 4.4 acres of trees on the site.
Yeah.
And then they said they were gonna plant red maple, thornless honey locust, and Washington hawthorn. Does any of you guys know what Washington hawthorn is? Well, it's a small little tree, and it's got thorns about this big, sharp as a needle. I don't know who you expect to be living around this tree. But that is not good. There's one native species in the list, in the red maple. The thornless honey locust is a nice tree. It's not native to here, but it will grow nicely here. And the Washington hawthorn, like I said, I wonder what those three trees are just not. I'm not happy with it. The red maple gets to be a medium-sized shade tree, probably 50 feet tall, and like not the strongest tree. And all these trees will need like some maintenance all the time. So I wonder what AMI meant.
Area median income.
Area median income. And where are all these people going to be working?
They probably already work in the area or try to.
Yeah. And the low income people that are working in the area?
I don't think of the folks here as being low income as much as people who need affordable housing is what it really comes down to. I don't like labeling in that aspect.
Right. I wasn't trying.
No, I know. I mean, I'm just, we're in a public place and that's where you have an opportunity, right? Yeah. So I don't look at, it's not low income people, it's low income, it's affordable housing.
So you guys are going to plant 200 trees. How many trees are you going to remove of that 4.4 acres? I'm asking you planners.
I don't know the exact number right now, but
I think 200 trees is nothing in comparison to that. I'm a tree guy.
Thank you.
Do we have an arborist in the city?
A tree warden.
A tree warden, okay.
We have,
Yeah, can we get a second opinion on some of the trees that the applicant is proposing?
well, yeah, I mean, we all sort of, for the first time tonight, kind of realized we had a planting plan that was submitted that they were still going with, so I think that is definitely something we'll dig into.
I think that's a good
And we're
idea.
gonna have to look at the proposed plantings, and obviously the maintenance and the conditions that are always associated with that will be necessary, but we can certainly do some
Yeah,
vetting of that part of it
I
as well.
appreciate that.
I think that's important.
I definitely
was moved by the lack of native trees.
Yeah, exactly. Great point.
Look,
Hey.
I know we're not focusing on traffic.
Name and address to start, please.
My name is Catherine Ahern. I live on Goth Street.
Pull the microphone closer.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I live on Goth. And I started being interested in this project because I live right around the corner from Cottage Street.
And there's quite a lot of traffic there. Some of you may have noticed. There are 15,000 trips over the mountain every day. So traffic is an issue. And I did speak with somebody in the planning department about traffic that might be generated by this project. And I was told that we just have to get used to it. And so I went and I looked at the Mass DOT traffic studies that they've done in a variety of places. And I looked at the traffic counts at Northampton Street North and South of O'Neill and the traffic count at Groveland Street. And it still didn't really make sense to me because really what I want to talk about is scope and scale. So I checked the traffic counts on Route 9 in Hadley and Route 9 in Amherst near 116 and on King Street in Northampton that probably many of us may think of as being far busier streets than Northampton Street here in Easthampton. And what I discovered by, we start to look at the traffic that's been generated, will be generated by Starbucks and by the traffic count that's been adjusted now by removing one restaurant. We're still up to traffic counts, projected traffic counts close to what happens on Route 9 in Hadley. And that's a lot of traffic. So one of the things I wanted to point out that if the numbers that the developer has given us, that we would reduce the trips by 1,300 or 1,400 cars by removing one restaurant, we certainly would reduce the traffic again by another 1,300 or 1,400 trips per day by eliminating the other restaurant. And in terms of the issue of scale, the size restaurant they would be talking about is somewhere between the Applebee's and the Texas Roadhouse on Route 9 in Hadley. So you have some idea of what the scale of that restaurant would be. In terms of the scale of the apartment buildings, they are 30% bigger than this building that we're in right now. This building is about 25,000 square feet. The projected apartment buildings are 39,000 square feet. Now, the other thing I just want to point out is that I've done an informal inventory of the undeveloped land on Route 10 or Northampton Street, starting from, I think, a little bit north of, no, actually all the way down to the Rotary, up to the Northampton town line. And that inventory includes 98 acres of potentially developable land. And my question to you is what are you going to say to the people who own that other 60-odd acres of land when all of the opportunity to build on Northampton Street has been given to one developer? Because there won't be room for any more cars. I mean, at some point, there isn't going to be a way to mitigate all of the traffic that's being generated while the town is, is also looking at a Main Street improvement project, looking at an upgrade of the Pleasant Street area, and trying to make an inventory of retail space in Northampton that's underutilized. The other thing is I would like to suggest that we receive fairly soon a lighting plan for this project. There's an abutter who's very concerned about dumpsters near her property. Does she ever have any idea of what the lighting is going to be like if the Texas Roadhouse is built next to her? I think that's everything. And I will submit, I've made my little inventory of using the DOT studies. And I will submit that to the planning.
Great, thank you. All right. We have time for a couple more people. I do see Elizabeth Goodman online, and then we can go back in here. Can't hear you, Beth.
How about that? How about that? There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. As you know, I represent 102 Northampton Street LLC, and I have 2 points, which are our client has made very reasonable requests, which have been supported by your technical peer reviewers, and that is that Mountain View be shown on the plans, and it's been repeatedly ignored. And so even though this is a traffic issue, I think it bears repeating again so that when they come back next time with traffic information, they don't again ignore the position of these commercial business owners. And that is both the showing of Mountain View, but also dealing with the traffic from Mountain View and access for that street. Ignoring it won't make it go away, and it just frustrates these business owners who have repeatedly brought before you their comments, and it's difficult to proceed when they're just ignored. Secondly, they show this rotary, which if they're going to proceed with the rotary, fine, but I would reiterate the important point that if they're doing traffic mitigation, they must have it on their own property. They can't propose some kind of traffic mitigation on someone else's property and then say that DOT will permit this. That wouldn't be mitigation that your board could consider. And so we question the size of their little sketch of the rotary and the efficacy of it and the use of it on property that it appears might not be theirs. So for all those reasons, I am speaking again, even though traffic isn't before you, with our concerns about those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Got a couple more in the room here? Okay.
Tom Brown, Grove Street in Easthampton, member of the Easthampton Economic Development Commission. As I stated in an earlier meeting, the EDIC, or Economic Development Commission, strongly supports this project. Personally, I've been able to attend the public hearings related to this project, and I continue to believe that this project will benefit the city of Easthampton with much needed childcare services and new housing units. You can see how great the housing need is with the new apartment building on Cottage Street. That building, which is currently under construction and will provide 23 new apartment units and isn't even completed, is already fully rented. I can appreciate everyone's position on this subject. However, at an earlier meeting, I was very disappointed to hear some remarks. A comment was made that this project would create a city within a city, and they wouldn't be part of the city, and they wouldn't need to come out except to drive on our roads. I would like to believe they will be considered residents of Easthampton. They will be our neighbors, our friends, possibly even our children and our grandchildren. They would support our restaurants, our stores, our entertainment venues. And they would be welcomed into our community as would any new families moving into Easthampton. A city within a city. That's called a neighborhood. A neighborhood like New City and Hannibrook and Meadowbrook and the Plains, to name only a few. None of us consider these to be a city within our city. These are neighborhoods that help to make our city what it is. This site is a former farming site, but so isn't most of Easthampton. Most likely where my house and your houses are located. Our city desperately needs additional housing units. Our city desperately needs additional childcare services. And our city desperately needs new business development. This particular site is located in one of Easthampton's main business corridors. It has long been zoned highway business and residential. This project proposes to deliver exactly what the property is zoned for. If we as a city don't allow development to occur where the zoning allows, then where do we allow it? I hope you will approve this project for the benefit of all of Easthampton. Thank you.
All right, one more.
Garrett Stover, Easthampton Conservation Trust. We sent, speaking to the microphone, please. We sent a letter by email just this evening, and I would like to read that. I would also just preface that with a couple of comments. I know driving in here, most of us smelled smoke. That was from Canada. It's just another reminder that everything in the natural world and us are all connected. And what you do here, what Easthampton does here, is going to affect Westfield, Southampton, Westhampton, Northampton, and the entire watershed of the Manhan, and Mount Tom, and Park Hill, and all the rest of it. And I can't help but take exception to the comment, the refrain that people who are hoping to improve this development are against development and against affordable housing. That's not true. So, SCOMAC has reviewed the latest plan submitted by Tasty Top LLC. Please accept these further comments as a supplement to our previous letters on particular matters described below. We are heartened to see that the applicant begin to respond to public comments. However, the changes made to date do not address the serious impacts this development would have on wildlife habitat, conservation areas, prime farmland, and the Manhan River. Resources which, as we've repeatedly shown, the city of Easthampton is committed to protect in all its plans through its overall zoning code and in the smart growth zoning district regulations and guidelines. We've attached a map, which hopefully will be up on the city's website soon. And that shows why the latest revisions are not sufficient. While its removal substantially improves the proposal from the perspective of one abutter, and certainly is better environmentally as regards the stream that runs through the site, the newly emitted building was not located in the most critical and intact wildlife habitat close to the Manhan River. The buildings remaining in the latter area, even if moved the proposed few feet, would still irrevocably disrupt this vital wildlife corridor. The expected serious visual and other impacts on our public conservation area and its trails just across the Manhan also remain. However, we are very encouraged that the latest plan demonstrates that Tasty Top LLC can and will alter its proposal to respond to matters raised during the review. This is proof that the applicant can and will make such changes when required. Still, a project which complies with Easthampton's land use regulations and goals will involve further and more substantial plan revisions. We are confident that the Planning Board and Conservation Commission will fulfill their respective responsibilities in requiring these. Lastly, SCOMAC Conservation Trust once again offers to join with its conservation partners to work with the applicant and the city for its permanent protection of the areas discussed above. We remain convinced that this project can become a fine example of smart growth, which combines both profitable and productive housing and commercial development with significant conservation of Easthampton's remarkable natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I know we.
It's a clarifying question.
Sure, if it's quick.
It is. Heather Beck, Ward 2 resident, Easthampton business owner. This is directed at Jeff Beck. My partner Rachel Roberts came and spoke last meeting about the density requirements for affordable housing and just was wondering if the current plan is in compliance with the zoning, or does the applicant need to add 63 more units to make it the number that's in the zoning code?
We're in the midst of that analysis and figuring out where that stands, but that did not get lost in the shuffle.
Thanks so much,
you.
guys.
I would just add that the zoning has a certain expectation attached to it. The density that was mentioned last time is the minimum, but like with most zoning codes, the rigidness of that is sometimes there, and sometimes there's a waiver provision, which there is a waiver provision built into the smart growth to allow, when that zoning was created, there was no project, there was no proposal, so there was no way to know exactly what we should be getting. So I would expect the applicant to be submitting waiver requests. We haven't mapped out exactly what that looks like yet. The applicant hasn't provided that information, but I would expect at the next meeting, there'll be an articulation of what that waiver looks like for the land board to evaluate that.
And I think also a waiver for the bank, right? That requires a waiver as well.
Correct.
So we are going to continue this, as we said. I just kept a quick list here of things, non-exhaustive, to think about for the next meeting for the applicant. So we'll talk about traffic. There was mention of design standards, being able to talk about the design standards. The Concom peer review won't be done for our next meeting, so that'll go on until July. If there's any updates on that sewer access issue, I think that would be helpful. I think we could use a little more detail on the tree planting and the tree removal. If we have that, even if it's sort of general areas of where the trees are going to be removed, I think that would be helpful. And a lighting plan, I'm not sure if that was in a prior version, but if we can make sure it applies to the new buildings, that would be helpful. And then I don't know, this is probably more planning than you folks, but maybe Jeff, we can look at if, how, and whether we should or could do performance bonds in a project like that, at least knowing what we have as options, I think would be helpful.
I didn't get discussion on the facades.
But that was the design standards, but yeah, I think the sort of aesthetic stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to respond when he mentioned the bonds, just as a fact of how these are developed. In the phasing and in the development of the housing, the dirt doesn't get moved until the closing occurs with the state financing and all the equity that is needed to build that phase. They don't, and they are definitely bond requirements. Again, we're talking about tapping, $20 million of state resources plus a lot for each phase. There's tremendous eyes, legal and oversight on that. So they are bond required, but again.
And I think also a lot of those problems could be dealt with through conditions on the phasing as far as what needs to be done before you move to the next step. I want to make sure we know sort of.
I think probably everybody in the room has seen those developments where the foundation is there, the rebar's there, but nothing else.
Yep.
Everybody
knows. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay, and so then, yes, were we talking the 27th? Is that right?
That would be ideal to accommodate schedules, vacations, and then
we also have the bylaw, the ordinance meeting on the 20th, right? So this way we would have this is almost standalone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do the 27th to 6.
Yeah, does that work for the applicant? Have you guys, that's all right for you, June 27th?
Yes.
Okay.
Continue the Tasty Top Development LLC, June 27th to 6 p.m.
I'll second that. All right, voting to continue to June 27th. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstaining. Okay, thanks again, folks. We still have 2 more items on our agenda, so we can move your conversations outside. We'll all get home to dinner even sooner. All right. Lawyer.
I think that's part of the.
Open meeting.
We've got more agenda stuff.
You can't talk about Yes. People who are sticking around, we're taking 1 minute here for a quick break. Everyone else, leave. I know what you're going to ask. No.
Yes, please. What about the?
Really eager to play golf course, but I can't. I carry this all the time. Have a gavel up here. You can't gavel people out of here when we don't have Danny back from the rescue. There is a gavel. There it is. It's something all the way over, right? Now I got Did you think he was free to go? Signing numbers before we leave. All right.
Shouldn't be much longer, folks.
So actually we can, because you know what? He's gonna have to come through anyways. There he is. All right, so next up on our agenda tonight is Jeff Arthur seeking a special permit at 4244 Pleasant Street.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hey, welcome.
I'm an architect out of Florence. I own Meeting House Architecture. I'm here representing the Tom Bryant family. Their family's owned this building for a very long time. We're here because the building is seeking a change of use from mixed use to residential only. Currently, it is a business use with a residential use upstairs. I have a small, short slideshow we can go through. Yep. If you see the letters ZBA on it, it's because we've done this before. Don't take offense, but we're going to go through the same presentation because it's pretty well put together.
Yeah, and notwithstanding the time, feel free to take your time. If we run out of time for comments and need to do some of that next meeting, we can do that, but I want you to feel like you get to make your whole pitch.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity for the planning board to look at this project as well. It's an existing non-conforming, and it's a change of use. So that's why we're before you today. Just a word about our firm. We're located in Florence. We're not a very old firm, but we work on very old buildings. We specialize in adaptive reuse, and we feel like not only for our environmental missions, but for our cultural missions, the reuse of building stock is essential to our communities. The store has been owned and operated by the family since the 30s. Retirement of the patriarch led to leasing of the store in the late aughts, early teens, and the retail space underwent some unpermitted alterations and was closed. I say building, I mean the retail space on the first floor. There are, according to the property card, 4 units upstairs, 2 of which were never built out, 2 of which were and are currently occupied. So there are renters in the building.
Just to be clear, there's 2 empty spaces up there.
There's 2 empty spaces. It's on the property card as 2 empty spaces. It's actually 1 big empty space. It was just never built out as 2 additional apartments. Project goals. Like I said, we're looking to transition from mixed use to residential only. The 2,600 square feet of ground floor retail would become 3 one-bedroom units and would also accommodate a small owner space in the back. It's for storage, an electric snow blower, upkeep, that kind of stuff. It's a very small room in the back. Again, there's 2 existing second floor units that would remain, and the additional upstairs unit, open space that was 2 units on the card will be 1 big, 1 bedroom. In addition, there's improvements to the property. There are some masonry repairs that have to happen in the basement. We're going to go for new exterior cladding and trim, and the roof it's time for the roof to be replaced as well.
Since we're going from a storefront to a residential use, the Pleasant Street facing windows will get higher performance windows with STC ratings. I also want to point out that the owners have hired an architect, not just for construction control, but because they're taking their time and really making an effort to upgrade this building. It's not just going to be putting as many into this. It's about making apartments that feel like home. And you'll see some of that in the presentation. This is an example of one of the units, the one on the corner of Pleasant Street and Hill Ave. Currently half of the retail space, roughly half the retail space. So large 1-bedroom, and we put a lot of time and effort into these units out as well. Isometric of the kitchen and entryway. And you heard me talk about apartments that feel like home. We went through an exhaustive design process with the owners, looking to make sure that there are home-like moments, that these apartments are not just quote unquote rentable, but are attractive. There's some views of what it could look like. We're looking to retain the historic nature of the building, even though not much of the history of the building physically remains. We're recladding the exterior. We're looking to put back the storefront that was once there and give the building some character. Site plan, it's worth talking about the actual changes that are happening on outside of the facade of this building. Not much. We are basically going to be reconfiguring parking. With the current uses, it's worth noting that with 3 dedicated to first floor retail, 1 per 1,000 square feet, plus 4 1-bedroom units on the second floor, plus a visitor spot, we're at 8 parking spots. The site cannot accommodate 8 parking spots. It's non-conforming. Our proposal is for 6 total units, 1-bedrooms, 1 parking spot per bedroom, plus a visitor spot, which is 7. 7 we can accommodate. The space that you see that's hatched will be the additional visitor spot, and that just needs to be contracted as a space that snow is cleared out of in the winter.
And is that where it says 36.95?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
So we can accommodate the visitor spot. It just requires snow removal, and the owners have already agreed that's no problem. If there are people renting who need additional parking, this came up during the ZBA presentation. The owners know a lot of the abutters and a lot of the property owners nearby, and can arrange for additional parking spots as needed, and those could be part of a lease or some other agreement. So I have some updated drawings I'd just like to pass around. One of the concerns at the ZBA meeting was lighting the parking lot, how that would be handled. Hot off the presses, so I just wanted to share them.
Great. And just for our record and people here, I'll explain what you've been doing at the ZBA, why you were there first.
Sure. Again, it's a existing non-conforming property. The building was put up well before setbacks, and we're over those setbacks. Like a lot of the buildings in Old Easthampton, they abut the sidewalk. And since it's a change of use on an existing non-conforming building, we're doing the rounds. We started with ZBA, and just the way the planning worked out, we're here at planning board.
Thank you.
The ZBA did add a condition for lighting. You had the text with me, but it was pretty boilerplate. Just that it informs the zoning ordinance and lighting standards.
Okay.
So 0 overlap of the property line, that sort of thing.
Right. So we're looking at angles for the shrouds. We're probably going to do goosenecks. They look good with the existing sort of storefront architecture.
Sorry.
And the goosenecks have the advantage of being able to not just shade the bulbs, but also you can kind of dial in the angle so we can keep the light from splashing.
Just totally hogged the microphone. I totally did, sorry.
Any questions or comments from planning board right now? James?
I did have just a couple. One is I'm having a little bit of trouble visualizing how the stairs to the side. So I'm understanding now that there will be 3 up top, 3 down below. And I'm seeing a couple different doors on the plans, but I'm not really understanding like how you navigate it. Like, is it one way up to all 3 apartments? Are there separate stairs up to?
So this is a very old building, and it was originally 2 buildings. The upstairs actually has a corridor. It is code width, and the staircase is very wide. I think it's 42 to 48 inches. That goes down the back and empties out of an emergency exit that's shared by the 2 upstairs units, soon to be the 3 upstairs units. The downstairs units all have their own egress.
Separate.
Separate.
Okay. So it's one to get access to a hall to all 3 up top, and then down below it's all set.
But I should add that the new project is going to be sprinklered. When these old units were built, they were not. They have dual egresses, and that's why there's so many doors in this building. There are some secret staircases that you can't really tell what they are from the outside, but currently both upstairs units have 2 egresses.
And is that going to be maintained?
Those 2 upstairs units are not being touched, and they're going to retain their private staircases.
Okay. So the new one will have to use the hallway, the other 2 will have double.
And since everything's being sprinklered, we've done our sort of code egresses. They're all good.
Can you go back to the parking diagram?
Sure.
I just want to know, it looks a little tight up to the edge of the building. You know, there's a visualization of a truck there, and I'm imagining myself in it. Thank goodness that most of them have cameras these days, because that just seems a little tight to me. Are you at all concerned there's enough clearance there?
So these are 9 by 20 spaces, like they're supposed to be, and we have 18 feet to the building. I think the minimum for residential use is 15. I think the maximum for commercial use is 24. So we're right in there.
And say personal experience. I used to go here all the time. It's tricky, but it's not extremely difficult.
Not the worst.
It's not the. It's a little tricky, but it's fairly in the spectrum of reasonable.
And it will only be people living there and their guests now, so at least it's not a public parking lot. So I assume it was something people will think about and learn how to do efficiently and safely. Or they'll get their bumpers repaired a lot.
Can you talk about that number? Oh, I'm sorry, Ken.
Just real quick, is a handicap parking required for this unit?
So during our code review, we found that an ADA unit is not going to be required as part of the renovation, and therefore we're not going to be doing an ADA unit.
What if someone like uses a wheelchair and has a van with a wheelchair? Would they have a designated parking spot, like, so no one would park there except them, or is it anybody gets in?
Yeah.
Number 6.
Number 6?
At the sidewalk, perhaps.
Or they would determine that they couldn't rent this apartment because they're in a wheelchair.
So, which feels a little discriminatory. Right. I think, given the relationship with the owners, with nearby residences and commercial owners, they would work to figure something like that out.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. And now, with regard to the 1 car per individual, and there is 1 guest spot, I'm guessing, you know, if someone else has a guest, the person that gets, that'll probably cause some strife amongst the neighbors. It's kind of setting things up for disaster. But I mean, it is to be expected that if anyone has a guest over there and that spot's busy, it seems like there's a likelihood that some on-street parking is
will overflow. I think it's going to be up to, again, these are local owners. They're not from out of town. They're not just throwing leases around and saying goodbye. If someone has a regular guest or a couple moves in and they need an extra spot, I think that's something that's going to have to be a conversation with the owners.
Yeah, but as you just pointed out, both there is on-street parking there, and there's plenty of parking all around. So.
There is, although we're trying to relieve
overnight and that sort of stuff is going to be a mess and not something I think we'll want to build into a business plan.
Yeah.
But I do think these are all things that will largely be driven by the specific tenants and the landlord. And it sounds like they have other parking options that, while may not be part of the consideration we have, might at least remove some of the potential problems that might arise.
Yeah, the goal here is not just to follow the ordinance, but also to relieve this sort of like overflow onto the city streets.
And so what is the number that's required for this?
6+1.
Oh, 6+1 is required, yeah.
So they have it. I think it's a little unclear if the +1 is even required, because it's 1 for every 10 units.
Right, okay.
So no, you round up to 10.
Right.
Is it 10 and then you add 1?
Okay,
So it's something else more.
So
yeah,
this means
okay, so this meets it, but it's tight, which is why you're raising it.
That's right.
And it will be consideration for tenants and the owner.
And part of the reason we're going through this process is a change of use. We're actually making this building more conforming by changing it. We're also sort of reducing the trips into this property by changing it. We're also, trying to contribute to the housing stock and find good long-term tenants.
2 more quick questions. One, you mentioned snow removal. Clearly that's not plowed because you're not getting a plow in there. It was like a snowblower put into that spot or.
For it to be removed off-site.
Well, you said you're putting it roughly where it says 36.95. The guest spot would also be a snow overflow. Am I wrong on that?
The snow would have to be removed from the site.
Oh,
in
it's
order
getting
for that,
pulled away.
right? And a service would come in, bucket it out, and the owners would pack it.
And then the last one that I've got, where it says 11.6, is that a yard? Is that, what is that exactly?
It's hardscape, and it, if you're standing there, it basically looks onto the neighbor's driveway.
So it's, as you said, by hardscape, you mean it's impervious?
Yeah, it's impervious. And that bump out is part of the old lot, basically, the old lot line. And that small rectangle you see is the dumpster.
I was gonna ask that. That's a dumpster there, or is that not on property then?
You can move that back, sorry about that.
Yeah. So that seems gonna be challenging to get that parking desk spot, and you get a dumpster sitting in front of it or off site.
Right.
So where would it go?
We can move it up against the building so that it's out of the way of the swing for the last parking spot.
Okay.
Like in that hardscaped area you're talking about? Yeah.
I think you put it in parts of the area.
How'd you get a truck back in and empty it? Yeah.
Because you go over the lot line.
You'd have to go over the lot line.
There's no fence or.
That is a tricky issue.
Or, yeah, Jeff?
I can't answer that tricky question, but I do want to go back to what Eli said is correct. So for multifamily housing, which is this category, it's 1 space for each bedroom in each unit, plus 1 additional visitor space for every 10 units. So technically that visitor space is not required. I think the applicant has been trying to show good faith that it can be provided, that might get used. But I just want to reiterate that just in case it is a factor in dumpster location, which maybe is an item that comes back at the next meeting just as a detail.
Yeah.
So we don't want to condition 6+1 because they may need the +1 for other purposes.
Well,
Maybe
I
it's
think
something
we
to
can,
think
I
about,
mean, what I want to do is come back with a draft decision and wrap this up next meeting.
Okay.
Because I do want to get to this, the third item tonight. But I want to make sure we get any questions from the planning board or thoughts right now.
Last comment, and this is absurd, and I certainly won't judge you, but I see this property as being ideal for the use of the bike path, which is nearby. And having some way for those tenants, especially the ones upstairs, to store bikes, I think would be a real beneficial thing for people at this property, just saying.
We have integrated bike storage into the ground floor units. We're not sure about what to do about the upstairs unit, but that's something that the clients asked for. If I may, I don't want to push things to a reasonable point. We were looking to get a building permit on this end of the month.
Okay.
So I was hoping to wrap this up today, if possible. If things are hanging, we have too many questions or too many potential issues, I understand the need to continue.
Well, let's see, first of all, any comments or questions from the public on this one? Okay, so then I guess our real question, yeah.
Tom Brown, Grove Street, Easthampton. EDIC did not weigh in on this project. However, whether it's 200 units or 4 units, every unit of Easthampton is 1 step closer to the goal. So I personally, and I'm guessing if EDIC had a chance to review this, we would be supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you. So the only thing I'm thinking, I mean, I think our next meeting would be on the 20th. And the truth is, I'm not sure you would get a decision quicker if we even were able to vote on it tonight, just because it has to be drafted and prepared. So it might be easier if we come back on the 20th, and that way we could vote on the 20th with a decision in front of us. And I do think we maybe do need to give some thought to this dumpster parking spot thing too.
I can ask also, can I say something?
Please come right up, name and address. Sorry.
Michelle Pomerant, 50 Love. I could ask if I could put, see the back, we got 3 feet behind. We used to let somebody else put a dumpster there. We could ask if, I could ask Nick if it would be all right if I put my dumpster, because he has been better.
So you'd need some sort of signed document giving you a egress, or what's the word I'm looking for? Easement.
The easement is with the deed from back in the 1900s. We had a right of way going from.
Okay.
Install some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that might be the easiest thing. I'm just thinking, I don't, tell me if you disagree, Jeff, but I think that it's probably going to take the better part of 2 weeks to get the decision drafted and ready to go anyways. It might be easier to just do it on the 20th.
That'd be my preference, but so one other factor, so if we continue to the 20th, the board is agreeable to voting, we can get the permit recorded with the city clerk, so pretty much the next day, but then there's a 20-day appeal period, so that will be the problem with the building permit.
So what's the problem? Is the parking okay with the 6 now?
It is. I mean,
So then why can't we go through with it tonight?
Eli is saying that he has a draft decision.
Oh,
that's potentially available to walk through, but,
so my perspective on it was that +1 is a kind of a bonus, you know, it's required at 10. If the dumpster were to go there, I mean, I used to go here almost every day, for a while, but people parked right in front of there all the time. And it's Pleasant Street's very wide. And if the nature of a guest is, you know, a few hours, stop by for dinner, whatever it is, and not the situation as mentioned, a couple sharing the 1 bedroom where that would have to have some alternative arrangements with the property owners and their immediate connections or whatever. If it simply is the nature of a guest, that's how private neighborhoods function, right? You park, you know, like if you live in a cul-de-sac street and somebody comes over for a birthday party, then you see people parked on the road. Pleasant Street's not a narrow road, it's very wide. Those people parked on the side, and I personally never saw that as an encumbrance to the normal operation of Pleasant Street. So I would say that the simple solution is remove the +1, put the dumpster there, and allow for temporary, you know, reasonable 1 day or less than a day guests to park in the front of the store, or the residences, which people used to do when it was operating as a store and wasn't an issue. And I think we're really close here. Yeah.
I agree 100%. And I think the issue really here is about time required to draft the decision.
Yeah.
I don't see, unless someone else has anything, that we have any specific conditions that we're needing to apply here.
There's no reason we can't pass this tonight. No reason whatsoever.
All right. Well, have we covered through our special permit considerations?
What we want to do is run quickly through the findings.
Let's go through it so we can do the findings now.
I can make it pull it up.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's do that.
Just one more note on the parking. I understand where the board is potentially leaning. You know, your requirement is to find that it has 1 space per bedroom, and there's 6 units. So that extra space is something that maybe it's good that you're aware of, but you're not required.
It's not a condition.
There is on-street parking allowed, and technically in the zoning, what the snag that we see is you have to make sure that the parking is provided on site for the use. Right. That can't be shipped off to all the on-street parking, but this guest parking.
Sort of reasonable use by people who are coming to visit is not a requirement.
Correct.
All right. I think we went through all the relevant findings, Eli, because we're not clearing anything and we're not affecting the water table or city services or anything, but I think the only ones we didn't touch don't apply, but Can you read that? Can you see?
Can you zoom in a little bit and then we?
Sure. Conformance with the provisions of city ordinances, we've done that. Protection of amenities and abutting properties, amenities of offensive uses, with that. Traffic and safety impacts, let's cover that. Methods of disposal of sewage and refuse, drainage of surface and subsurface, we've covered that to the extent it applies. Next. Means protecting wetlands, no, not an issue. Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, not an issue. Off-street loading and unloading of vehicles, we've got that covered. Applicant's efforts to integrate in the development into the landscape. Oh, too fast. That's right. Minimization, is minimization of existing vegetation. Consistency of the development with respect to setback area placement of parking. Advocacy of measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater. And methods to ensure that the use will not be a nuisance by reason of any unacceptable use. I think this checks all those boxes.
Yes, I concur. So then there is that proposed condition there, which is pretty standard. And it would be maybe this plan for lighting. So the lighting would be, let's propose elevations and it would be updated or revised on June 6th. I think this would be the elevation plan that we would want to reference the permit.
But do we want to state in the recitation at the top, maybe that we are not requiring the +1? So it's clear that, you know, if somebody looks at this 9 months from now and they decide to put their dumpster in that +1, they don't need the +1, right?
I would suggest we put it into the finding, right? The finding about parking.
But because that condition requires that they be built and maintained in accordance with this plan, which shows 6+1.
Okay.
So I would just want.
That only 6 spaces are required,
Yeah.
+1 is optional.
And it satisfies that.
Okay.
So
we can add that later.
If we add that in, then we can probably get this signed.
And can I confirm you just added a second condition regarding the lighting plan with the other part there?
I think we would want the exterior lighting to be in accordance with the elevations revised on June 6th, just to follow suit with what the ZBA had requested.
I think that sounds good.
So, yeah.
Lighting condition?
Yeah, just lighting with, I think, in accordance with that plan, it's June 6th, the plan we would be referencing.
And then the only other thing is just making clear somewhere in the findings that we don't require the +1, even though it's reflected on the plan.
Yep,
So we can get that. All right, perfect.
This is great. We should rate.
Any other comments or questions from the public? All right.
A motion to approve the special permit for multifamily housing for job author with the aforementioned findings and conditions.
Second. All right, voting to grant the special permit. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstaining. All right.
Thank you.
We'll get a decision ASAP. Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, board.
All right. For everyone still here and awake, next on the agenda, Easthampton Mahadev LLC seeking a special permit for multifamily residential at 334 Main Street.
Thank you.
Two hours in, we beat Boston by now.
That's right.
Out here running.
Not here,
So-
fair enough.
Well, maybe he's running, but not if we're running.
What is this running?
No idea. That's
Think of Red Top and drop another one tonight?
Drop it and lose it? Oh, no, I hope not.
All right, proceed.
Hi, I'm Terry Reynolds, T. Reynolds Engineering. I'm here and representing College Highway Variety. What's being proposed, whether it's 334 on Main Street. And what's being proposed is to renovate the upstairs portion of the building. It is currently a very large one-bedroom apartment on the second floor, and downstairs is the College Variety. And it's a difficult site. Basically, right now, the parking up front is difficult and is not delineated in any way. It's kind of show up, park as you can. And unfortunately, due to revisions over the years, Mass Highway put in islands and things like that. This used to be a site where people would back out into the road, come and go. And that is no longer the case. So now it's kind of haphazard parking in front. The rear of the site has always been for the apartment. The apartment is, I believe, like 2,700 square feet, crazy size, 4 bedrooms. But parking has always been there, back there. It's never been delineated. So what's being proposed now is no changes to the variety store, but taking the second floor and converting it from a 4-bedroom, 4-bedroom single unit to 4 1-bedroom units, separate units. From a bedroom standpoint, it's pretty much the same. The use is very much the same. What's being proposed is delineate the actual parking for the apartments. So it's required to have 4 spaces. We're also doing an additional visitor space there, adding screening to the abutting property, so the 6-foot fence, and then curb stops for the parking. The property's also not only been encumbered over the years because of the Mass Highway improvements, but in recent years, a portion of the site has been donated to the city so that we can have a sidewalk along there. So that further has made the parking up front very difficult. At this point, there's no, as I said, no changes being proposed to the parking in front, no changes to the use. The use as a variety store has really been reduced over the years. Currently, it's really tobacco and lottery ticket sales. People come in and going very quickly. There really isn't the variety that normally occurred in the past. So the actual area that's used for the store itself is like 100, 200 square feet, very small. The rest of it is kind of vacant space that eventually down the road that may be converted to storage or something like that. So that's really it. There's no changes in the lighting. The stairs there are 2 egresses, existing egresses that will remain with some updates just structurally to what the stairways are, but nothing else besides that.
They're external stairways, yes?
Yes.
So the spots that are going to be striped as tenant spots, are those currently used by variety store customers? No. So the customers are using the front to come in and out as best they can. It's a tough spot.
It is.
And it's a tough intersection. It's a tough spot and a really tough intersection.
It is. Additionally, if there are needs, aside beyond for the tenants that where, we talked in the previous meeting where there was a couple or something, there are available spaces in adjacent properties that can be accommodated.
Okay.
Such a use.
Questions from planning board members?
I just want to confirm I heard right, and admittedly it's getting late for me. So did you say 4 apartments up top? Is that?
Yes, it's going to go from one single 4-bedroom apartment to 4 separate 1-bedroom.
And what's the square footage of each of these apartments?
They're approximately going to be, 600?
700.
700.
657.
657, okay.
548 square feet up to 674.
There are 2 external stairways you just indicated, and I don't kind of see them on the plan. Are they remaining the access to the upper portion? Does that mean there's going to be a hallway?
Yes.
2 on one stairs, 2 on the other, kind of a thing? Is that?
No, it's the same hall.
It's a central hallway with just an egress coming out the side. Up on the top of it, you can see there's an egress coming the stairway there. And then the egress in the back.
Okay, so you go up the stairway, it's a hall that connects to the other stairway, and then there's 4 doors.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, there's 5 parking spaces, is that correct?
Yes.
So we just learned residential is 1 per, so we're 1 over, but what about the requirement for even though it's already existing, the commercial property requirement, I'm sure has some parking requirement as well. And even though we learned that they're not using the back spaces, there's still a requirement we have to follow, yes.
Right. It's a non-conforming use as it is. It doesn't meet parking. It can never meet the required parking.
So we have to wait.
And this went to the ZBA as well, is that right?
Yes.
And what was that for?
That was for the non-conforming does not meet the setbacks.
To change the, yeah, okay.
And change the use.
But not the parking.
Right.
I mean, the parking is always gonna be the hard part on this, and I mean, it's logical to try to ignore the first floor variety store, but it is also taking space from that parking. Please.
One thing that came up in some of these discussions is with the pre-existing non-conforming situation, you know, they are protected with what they have. And in discussions with the applicant, the approach that was chosen was to leave the store as is.
Okay.
It's tricky, difficult, as someone said, but it is functioning, and they're not proposing to change it. It sounds like there could be a plan in the future to change it, in which case they would come back and be dealing with whatever that change is. But there is some need for the board to focus on what is being proposed as the change and how.
James is right, how add the 5 spots, even if people don't traditionally park back there, that is taking away 5 customer spots. I mean.
Well, you just said it's pre-existing non-conforming, and that looked at from the perspective of no changes made on the first floor commercial space, we should leave that pre-existing non-conforming inviolate. The changes on the second floor don't equate to changes in the project a whole that would trigger a whole new assessment. Is that your statement?
That's the way it is. I think that's the way the applicant wants you to treat it, is that they are not going to be touching the store right now, and the store has function. It has been reduced in scale over time. I will say that we did talk to the applicant. They were gracious enough to donate a portion of the property to allow the sidewalk to be constructed, and that eliminated probably a space or 2 that was commonly used. But it was for pedestrian safety improvements that were more desirable for the city. But I think it's up for the board to decide whether you're willing to allow the rest of the pre-existing non-conforming use to just remain as is and look at just this proposed change. That's
Okay, let's set that aside for now. Harry got a question too.
Yeah, are you gonna be installing showers and bathrooms in this little apartment?
Yeah, they'll all have shower bathroom.
Toilet and everything,
Yeah,
the whole 9 yards? Okay.
Any other
Pretty
comments,
tight.
questions from the planning board? Yeah, James.
What, I didn't even, so I'm willing to put that parking to bed for me personally. You know, I mean, obviously for the residential upstairs component, there's enough spaces in the back. It's a small use. I am a little worried about it. There is some traffic there. People do move at a higher speed down that road. And it's a bit of a mess. Like, I just don't want to make a decision that's actually going to hurt somebody. But it's my take on this that you really can't do much there. If there was anything that I'd want to see, it would be any kind of investigation to like direct people or signage or something. That's about the only thing I think you could do. And there isn't much. Personally, with my concerns, I'm willing to let it go in this case. I think it's small enough to let go. That's my take.
Let's hear with anybody from the public, comments, questions.
Okay.
Yeah, really good.
There was a letter that got sent today. Did everyone get a chance to read that?
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Come on down, sir. Name and address, please.
Hi, Landon Jenkins, 5 Court, Easthampton. I run Old Colony Package Store in Easthampton, adjacent to Carter Rise. And in my experience with the applicant, over the last 7 years, as a neighbor and as a business owner, he's been nothing but exemplary. We've never had any issues with parking, trash, or any kind of noise.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please. I think I know what you're gonna say.
I'm going to, you know, but no, I just one other thought came to mind with these last 2 projects, which is, it might be the truest definition of infill. Here we have 2 units that we're not adding 1 square foot to the dimension of the buildings, but yet we're adding 4 more units. 4 and 3, 7 more units available to city residents or apartments without adding 1 square foot to any dimension of any building. So again, Adding units is a great thing. It's one step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
My name is Gladys Kleiner, and I'm a resident in the 55 plus 7 unit condo association at 64. So we are the immediate neighbors. And the letter, excuse me, was drafted by one of our condo association folks. Parking, I'm not even going to talk about. You all know how terrible it is. And that in addition to other things that have been mentioned frequently, there are very large delivery trucks for the package store, and they park on South Street because there really isn't any other place for them to go. Another, excuse me, concern, and I think everyone in our condo association is hopeful that with tenants on the second floor, that more attention will be paid to the exterior maintenance of the building. We'd like them to get rid of the graffiti on the back, which is currently there. And often we have found that trash has been widely distributed in that parking area at the back. We consider ourselves responsible and quite beautiful neighbors. And so we're hoping that if this goes through, there'll be a real upgrade to the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's the dumpster?
The dumpster is right there.
Oh, I see.
I don't think there's a physical dumpster. It's just saying where it will be located. I mean, to me, I just think the question is whether the first floor use includes the available space in the back. It's obviously not going to meet parking requirements any other way, but I don't.
Is there a reason why I mean, okay, so if you're living there and your spots are filled with people trying to buy lottery tickets, you're not gonna wanna live there. So the owner, it would behoove the owner to make sure that those are restricted to the residents who are paying to live there. So if you have signs there saying for residential, for resident use only, if people park there that are trying to, patronize the store, you could have them removed, whatever. I guess I'm not as concerned about it because if they're designated for the residents, maybe some signage there, then to me, that's.
Oh, I'm not worried about the residents not having spots. I'm worried that like the pre-existing use is a variety store with X hundred square feet in which to park.
And now
they can say they're not touching the first floor use, but part of it is that open space. So that's the part I'm trying to struggle with, right?
Yeah,
and I mean, not that I don't care, but I live in unit 2 and I come home, my spot is full. That's like a private issue.
Yeah.
Like don't want is the people that are like jackknifed in the front because they can't park in the back and they're pulling out onto Main Street or South Street or whatever. So that's the part. Please come up, sir. We're torn with this. Set our minds at ease.
In Naresh Patel, it kicks very well. The way we are touching, and you see the other project, the Paris State, not Paris State, Pleasant Street variety. This is the same situation with the small convenience store. When I bought the store in 2001, August 7th, I have like close to be 400 customer a day. Now we have like close to be 125 customer a day. So it used to be like I have like 3 different companies coming for the bread, the JJ Nissan, Wonder Bread, and somebody else. They are fighting for the space. Nobody comes anymore. There is the salesman comes always and say like, they're like, hey, carry my product. Nobody comes. So the convenience store, you see that why is the Pleasant Steel variety is closed? Right. And they want to turn into the something. It's an all small mom and pop store is gone. So College Highway is there for maybe 5 more years. I'm dying. Dying means dying. Since 2001, when I bought, the gross revenue is 600,000. Now is less than 300,000. After that much price increase, we used to sell the tobacco cigarette like Marlboro box like $3 or $4 a pack. Now $13 a pack. Still the revenue is less than half. It's same. If I don't have more business, then should be my revenue should be $2 million. But it's not. So the convenience store, the customer coming in and out, it's not many left there. I mean, we used to be closed 9 o'clock. We closed 7 o'clock. Even I went to today to pick up the check. And I see that my employees close at 6:45. And I said like, hey, we close before 7 o'clock. And it's like, well, last 1 hour, there is nobody's there. And we have a video recording. If you want to see anytime, there is not a customer comes in and here, one thing. The other thing about the 4 parking spot, I used to be live there from 2001 to 2012. And there is 8 people living in my family with the 3 different cars. So my last tenant who's lived there is 7 people living in that apartment. And they have a 4 car. So it's not like we are adding extra car. It's not like we are adding extra people. This is almost everything is same.
I mean, I will say, whenever I drive by, there's rarely a second car even in the lot as a customer.
Yeah, not
It's
man,
not-
and that's what I'm saying, like, that's exactly the Pleasant Street variety.
Yeah.
They're owned by like 1930, after 75 years, nobody want to open that convenience store back over there.
Yeah, no, I think
have
this would all
another-
be easier if you were
I have
turning to the
other
first
store,
floor.
Jerry's variety. The Jerry's variety is, I think I'm gonna be closed maybe in 4 or 5 years.
I have a question for you, and I'm very sorry to hear that. I want to see businesses succeed in our community.
Not in a
But
small.
after 4 or 5 years, what will you do with that first floor? Turn it
Maybe
into more
storage.
residential?
No, you can't.
It's
I
commercial.
allowed to that,
Yeah, what's the plan?
storage unit.
And will that require trucks and things to come in and out, and or will they park?
No, storage unit is like a small storage unit. I don't think so. That's gonna be truck. And there is a truck issue. What the liquor store have a trucks or the Coke or Pepsi deliver. This is not now. This is from like, God knows whenever the store is there. They always park on street. If you go on Pleasant Street, Jerry's Variety, the beer company, they park on the street. If you go to the Jim Packer store, they always park on street. There is no space to the 18-wheeler or whatever the truck to be go somewhere else. They need to be parked on street and deliver the beer or any product, milk.
And obviously. with
It's
the-
not like Biggies or Big Y, so they have their own big parking lot.
Are you planning on marking the spots as tenant only, or are those
Yes,
just?
tenant
they're-
only. And always been in tenant only. I
Yeah.
don't think so. The customer, they tell you the truth. Since we have a Jim Packer store, the another construction going on that side.
Yep.
And their parking lot is closed. We lost some customers. Because people doesn't want to park far and walk to any store. They want to just park front of the store and get in.
Yep.
I mean, that's why we have a sign here, like the town is a public parking here. Not many people come to park here. They're still going around and round and round on Carter Street and looking for the parking.
Will you change the exterior at all on the upper part, beautification of the property, siding, lighting? Do you have any plans for that?
We have no plan right now, no.
It's gonna stay the way it is,
Everything, just inside change.
inside only, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's the only question is whether the pre-existing, I mean, it doesn't sound like anyone has ever parked back there traditionally, that it's a space that's been actually used by the variety store, but it does feel like it was space dedicated to it, Harry.
When that store was opened up, didn't they have a parking requirement for so many spaces?
Probably not when that one opened up.
So this is all grandfathered in then?
Yeah, I mean, this is all pre-existing non-conforming. I mean, I don't think
So
you
in other
probably have
words,
enough
they might be
space.
10 or 15 spots, and they certainly aren't there.
Right.
They could take 4 or 5 away, it's gonna be less.
That, although, I mean, it sounds like practically speaking, that won't create a problem. And again, it's one of those ones where maybe there's not enough and that hurts business, but that's different from the concern about people doing something sketchy out on Main Street or South Street. So that's the only part that.
The current use, I'm willing to let it go because I do believe it really is small. Or because after 4 or 5 years, that space is open and it does something else. Maybe it's storage, maybe it's sold to some other company and rented out to some other commercial. That's the point at which if we didn't do something, I would, because there's no parking.
Well, that's completely hypothetical, so we don't know.
Yes, you can't. Yeah, I agree.
No, but it's the reason why what we're looking at now is important.
I do see pavement on the south of the building. I'm wondering if that can be utilized for anything, or even deliveries, right? There's like I'm measuring it on Google now, it's about 12 feet wide.
Yeah.
There is pavement on the east side of the building, adjacent to Main Street, that I don't know, I know people don't seem to park there anymore, but 4 or 5 years ago, people used to park there before the streetscape or the sidewalk improvements. There's still curb cuts for both of those. Could those be utilized? I do see a deck in the landing, in the back of the building, and I see it pitched to land to the south. If that were inverted and landed closer and landed towards South Street, that looks like that could open up another spot in the back by simply realigning the way the stairways go. If the stairway comes towards South Street, that opens up more parking. So I do see some potential here. I mean, I don't think it's as locked in. I think there's creativity that could be applied. Just
in the future.
Just putting it out there for discussion.
Is it better if they're not marked as tenant only spots?
If you're a tenant there, how do you feel about that?
Well, that's a tenant problem, right? But I'm wondering, I mean, if you don't mark it as a tenant only spot, then you're not taking anything away from the variety.
Spots gone.
Jeff?
One other idea, just a question, I guess, is, you know, if the board would feel any more comfortable with it, because, so we did look back, there is no permit history for how and when College Highway Variety got permitted as a planning board. There's just no files. But moving forward, now there's sort of a special permit potentially here. Would the board feel any more comfortable if we added a condition that, and we don't want to talk to the applicant, but, you know, any substantial changes to the first floor, we want to make it clearer that if there were a substantial change to that first floor, that you'd have to come back and that would be a special permit review with the planning board to determine what that is. So like, I'm thinking even if we're not thinking about minor changes in use in the first floor, imagine what could happen. So if you started to sell beer and wine there, you know, you'd have to renovate, and that would be a substantial change, and that would trigger a whole discussion on that. Or even going to storage units, just making it clear that some change is still going to be, you know, coming back to the board to deal with more of the front. And I think anecdotally, what the applicant was saying, that the patrons don't really use the back.
Right.
And I think that's part of what I think it's the planning board's hearing right now, but I think it's because of the reduction in the use over time.
I would feel more comfortable with such a condition. You know, who knows what you could put in there, and to do it without having to come before us with parking, create potentially hazardous conditions.
Let's hear what Terry has to add. So,
Well, we did look at the parking. The space, as you say, you know, there's 12 feet. This is a little confusing, but the west side, the Main Street side, you know, that originally before those landscape islands were there, people parked head in.
Right.
You know, and so you probably had 8 spaces across the front of the store. That's no longer a possibility. And we don't want to promote anybody backing into, especially, you know, Main Street, never mind South Street. So that kind of parking that happened back when we had, you know, horse and buggies going by isn't happening, isn't safe.
Right.
So what we've done in the back is try to maximize formal parking back there. There really is not a way to put formal parking spaces that have adequate space to back up and do any kind of normal maneuver that you would see in a parking lot. So what happens is people come in and they park side by side, you know, in here and drive, kind of, it's a drive-through parking. So that's
not unlike Old Colony, who was just in here talking, right?
Right.
It's an empty parking space.
Yeah, I mean, it's even tighter.
They have much more square footage over there, but
it's even tighter than that.
Oh, yeah.
There's no room.
No, you get 2 cars that loop into the front. That's what they do there. And
yeah, I mean, and on the south side there, you know, it's a driveway. There's not space to even put a parallel space and have somebody pass.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, we've looked at all of that on the site. It's just it's horrible in terms of that. So.
Would the applicant, would you consider if we added one condition such that if you changed the use on the first floor, the commercial use significantly,
Yes.
you'd have to come back? That's
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
All right. That would assuage my concern.
Okay.
all right, and our logic is that it's not altering the existing current use for the first floor use, even though it's taking away square footage. That place isn't really used for parking anyway. Is that our logical
Thinking of square footage of the parking lot. Right, right. The other that may be useful is that there were 4 bedrooms upstairs, and in theory, it is 4 bedrooms. It could result in another tenant or another couple, but the nature of the use upstairs is not changing substantially. So, right, this is a quick sidebar, but we are contemplating a zoning amendment that would consolidate what the ZBA did. Is the ZBA had to make a finding that the change, which is it's a structural change, this building was not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And they admittedly had a pretty hard time because they were talking about these very things that you're talking about. In the future, we would like the planning board to be dealing with both together. So you would, like in one thought process, you'd be asking, is this substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than what's existing today? And the CBA found that it wasn't. There were some concerns about the intersection of South and Main. There were questions about whether this was a big increase in traffic, which it really isn't. If you look at the number of bedrooms.
I think your point about the number of bedrooms not changing is also an argument in favor of the overall use, not the impact not really changing, right? I mean, in theory, you could have more than 4 cars for 4 bedrooms or 4 one-bedroom units. And I think based on the sort of minimal use and the historical use for the first floor, I think that makes some sense.
I have no further questions.
Any other comments from the public? Oh, Terry, come on. Come up to the mic. Let's finish strong. We're here at 8:30 already.
Do we have some draft findings? Can we vote on?
If we have a draft.
We have a similar document, I believe, to what we have reviewed for the other project, but there's a little bit more discussion that you've had about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've gone through all those factors again. It's the same kind of stuff because there's no alteration of the site, there's no removal, there's no change or impact on city resources. We've talked about deliveries, we've talked about trash and waste removal.
Just roll through it, bring it up and roll.
Roll it up again?
That's it. Great. Sorry, Eli.
No, we gotta make them work.
I know, that's last meeting. So
I think everything was stable.
Please bear with us as we make this happen. We pride ourselves in being an expeditious, but
All right, so conformance with the regulations, we know that one, we talked about that. No, I can't remember any of them. I showed off too much on the first one. All right, protection of city amenities and budding properties, we talked about that. Minimization of traffic and safety impacts, that has been a topic. Methods of disposal of sewage and refuse, adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds and aquifers. Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, covered that. Preventive prosecute loading and unloading vehicles, we've covered. Efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features. Minimization of area over which the existing vegetation has been removed doesn't apply. Consisting of development with setback area architectural style. Adequate measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater and minimize erosion. And ensuring that the use will not constitute a nuisance. So I think we've covered.
Could I propose we go back up to, is it D, the deals with parking? I think that was really the biggest crux of the discussion. So, and maybe it's not D.
It's further down.
I would like to just propose that it's G, thank you. And we did find that the zoning requires 1 space per bedroom, 4 bedrooms. There's 4 spaces provided plus 1.
Yep.
Right, so I'd like to make sure that we have that finding in there in terms of the facts that we were looking at. And then, Jesse, I think
So I think we found that the overall impact on parking was not likely to change, and that the recent historical use of the variety store generated parking only in the front also led us to conclude that the parking was sufficient and would not create a problem, safety problem.
Thank you. I think that's the key finding there. We can work.
Do you have that, or does he need to?
I have the overall impact on the parking. It's not likely to change based on the number of bedrooms, right? Overall, so it was 4 bedrooms. Now it's 4 1 bedrooms, and the reduction of use over time on the first floor. So I think that's there.
We can make sure it's in there.
Yep. And then the only other thing was this
condition that any change to the first floor use would require Well, I think what we need is any substantial change would require a special permit, but maybe any change to the use requires a finding by the planning board as to whether or not it's substantial.
Okay.
Right, so then anything other than a variety store, they come back and say, this is what we're doing, it's not gonna change anything, and we decide whether it needs a special permit or not, kind of like we do with the major or minor modification.
Okay, yeah. Let's just make sure.
Does that make sense to you, Naresh?
Yes.
So if you're gonna change the use at all, you come in and ask if it's a big deal, we think it's a big deal, you need a special permit.
Got it. Thank you.
Anything else, Jeff?
No, I think for the abutters who are here, I mean, you know, this will get recorded. It's now available. This will be the first time in decades that there's actually a permit for the property, which is good. But I think through this process, you've met the owner. We've all often recommended that now if you have other issues, you can reach out to the owner and make contact with them. But
And I think you're right, when there's 4 different people there paying rent, they might have some more complaints to their landlord about trash in the driveway and spray paint and stuff. So hopefully that will lead to positive change too.
I motion to approve the special permit for multifamily residential for Easthampton Mahadev LLC with the aforementioned finding and condition.
Also, all right. We're going to all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. All right, thank you all for your patience.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So we want to chat about anything else, or can I get a motion to adjourn?
No, we have one other thing we need to do.
Oh, we do, you're right. This is Eli's last minutes as a member of the Easthampton Planning Department.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah,
I'd
thank
like
you.
a motion to thank Eli.
All in favor?
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Who's gonna do all your work?
Jeff has so much capacity in his schedule and time.
back to the old days. Eli's gonna draft these couple weeks. Coming in tomorrow. We're gonna look these up. I'll do the minutes.
All right.
Be careful on that bike.
Okay, well, good luck on your, good luck on your next endeavors.
A
And
sincere thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Job well
Eli.
done, Eli.
well done, job well done here, and it's on record.
Don't be a stranger. All right, now,
Motion to adjourn.
Someone has to say.
I'm seconding it. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.